Yes, hello, and thank you for joining our panel on space transportation and logistics. The panel will be moderated by Scott Amyx, Managing Partner at Astor Perkins. Joining Scott on the panel are Dr. Luca Rossettini, CEO of D-Orbit, Junpei Nozaki, CFO of ispace, and Ian Fichtenbaum, CEO of Bradford Space. Scott, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Christine. I appreciate that. And good morning, good evening to all of you. Let's see, Junpei is joining us from Japan, and I believe Luca, I just saw your presentation at Dubai, so I'm not sure if you're still in Dubai or not. So thank you, everyone. So let's go ahead and do a quick round of introduction. Junpei, did you want to go ahead and start your introduction then?
Sure. Thank you, Scott, and good evening, good morning to our audience here. My name is Junpei Nozaki, and I'm from Tokyo. I'm CFO of ispace Inc., headquartered in Tokyo. Our business, as some people might know, but we are focusing on lunar exploration business. More precisely, we are the manufacturer of lunar lander, which is a transportation machine like Apollo back in 1960s. In our case, this is a robotics, no human lander. However, we are going to launch this lander later next year. This is going to be the first mission. We are going to do the lunar landing mission next year. Then our business is based on transportation business and also data acquisition business. So this is what we are going to do in next few years. Yeah, so that is my brief introduction, and this is my honor to present myself here. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. What we do at D-Orbit, we provide space logistics services. Our current business is focusing on the satellite operator sector. So we provide logistics service, so transportation. We transport satellites in the right position in orbit, where the satellites need to operate, saving up to 85% time from launch to operations and up to 40% cost for deploying the entire constellations. We offer additional services after the transportation is done, like in-orbit validation and transportation for technology, for new technology, innovation in space, and especially what we are building up right now. And the tests were already done in orbit during the last mission. It's the space cloud computing services, both for hosted payload that we have on board, but also for satellite operators that are operating there. Our whole objective is to use these capabilities and these services that we are delivering to enter into the in-orbit servicing market, especially tackling the issues of space development.
Amazing. Great. Thank you so much for that. And Ian, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Ian Fichtenbaum. I am the CEO of Bradford Space. Bradford Space is a provider of mobility solutions in space. And we do that in a variety of ways. And we've actually been doing it for quite a number of years in providing high-performance propulsion systems across the satellite world. The kind of things you want to use if you want to move around quickly and efficiently and with a lot of mobility. We're taking that and we're taking it to the next level of space mobility, of how do you go, what do you do when you are able to go around in space and conduct operations with a true ability to move from orbit to orbit and to move useful instruments and payloads in a robust way. So we're building and developing and building a class of spacecraft based on our technologies, a class of spacecraft that we've dubbed Square Rocket, that can accomplish this and provide a level of mobility that we don't think this industry has yet seen and has really been able to make a use of up until now. So we're very excited about what we can then do in space when we're able to move around, we're able to move useful payloads, and to be able to react to things happening in space and things happening on Earth or even other planets. So that's a little bit of a nugget of what we're doing at Bradford.
All right, great. So we're going to dig into this. We have plenty of time today. So let's start with Junpei, just because he's based in Japan. It's quite late his time. So let's start with the big picture. So Junpei, help us to understand the big picture of what you guys are trying to do and why now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Scott-san. So again, what our company is focusing on is a lunar transportation business. And the reason we think this is going to be a good business is, of course, there's going to be a huge demand, which is many private companies and also a public, including government space agencies like NASA or JAXA, they all would want to bring something to the moon. And further background here is why all peoples are focusing on moon. Because as many people might know, the evidence shows there are much abundance of water resource on the moon surface. Now, if we have a water resource on the moon surface, we can utilize this as a fuel for the transportation. So since water can be H2O, can be separated into hydrogen and oxygen, that means those are the direct propulsion fuel to move around the space area. And this is going to be the game changer for this space transportation and space mobility.
All right, so I just want to make sure that the other panelists feel free to jump in as well, even though we're primarily focused on the moon topic. But just to help the audience understand a little bit better is that for us to have deep space exploration ambitions, we can't just simply hop over to Mars or beyond our galaxy. We need depots or kind of intermediate steps. And help us understand, again, the importance of the moon. I know you mentioned water and hydrogen and oxygen, of course, but why is the moon an important step to, say, Mars? Why can't we just invest into Mars right now?
Right, definitely. That's a great question, and that's a very basic, important point. So maybe people knows, especially in US, we have a kind of a keyword like moons to Mars, right? So again, moon is a very important step towards Mars. Now, why we need moon is it's all about the cost. If we think about directly reaching to the Mars, to the moon, from the Earth to the Mars, definitely, first of all, we need huge cost because, first of all, we need to get out of this huge, strong Earth gravity. And this is exactly why we need to pay for, very high cost to launch a service. And also you need, many days you need until reaching to the Mars. Now, in terms of moon, we have a very unique point about the moon. First of all, is the gravity of the moon is only 1/6 compared to the Earth. That means you can easily get out of the moon if you have a resource, if you have a water resource, and if you can get fuel from the moon. It's really easy to get out from the moon gravity towards the Mars. And also, this easy means with very low cost, you can reach towards the Mars. So not directly going from Earth to the Mars, but rather than that, using the resource from the moon is much low cost. That is the point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So tell me, how do we best use the moon? So in other words, aside from the hydrogen and water aspects, what are some fundamental things we have to do on the moon first? So in terms of like a base or life support system, for instance.
Right. Yeah. Very basic thing. We need to start from searching a water resource. So there are many scientific, scientific missions back in several, back in the last 10 years or so. So we know that there is a water resource, but that is all based on the scientific testing. So someone needs to get on the lunar surface and start searching for the actual water resource and start digging those water resource from the regolith, which is a moon sand. So that is the very first step. And to do that, that is the first step. And then there's going to be a moon base, which means there's a huge, long value chain starting from mining, then separating water resource into hydrogen and oxygen, and also we also need electricity from the solar panel, and then a tank, storage, so on. So we really have a long value chain to create the water energy from this moon water resource.
All right, so I think there's some just pragmatic issues, right? So for us to create all that infrastructure, we need components, systems, machinery, robotics, and just materials, right? So how do we take all that to the moon, and what's the role that you're playing?
Right. Yeah, definitely. We need all industries to join this water value chain. Now, in terms of robotics and also like materials, so on. Yes, some things need to be transported from Earth to the moon, definitely. However, another important point is we have many rare materials on the lunar surface too, not only a water resource. For example, we know there are several companies already starting to seek for changing lunar sand into material. So again, here's the same similar context. We are not, since bringing all things from the Earth is really cost much. So we would try to utilize as much as possible the moon lunar resource itself as a local moon area. So use that lunar sand is one idea.
Yes. So again, totally understand in terms of 3D manufacturing, additive manufacturing, but you still have to bring things from the Earth to actually even do those things. So how would you actually package it up and be able to transport it there?
Right. So we have already started this trial mission with several private companies. And actually, again, our first mission is going to be next year. We have several customers already, which are combination of government and private companies. Private companies will start from bringing some sensors to gather some data, so that they can understand. As a next step, they can bring a real experimental device to the moon surface, and then the next step they will bring actual robotics. They will bring their facilities, so on. So we are providing that transportation service, and we are charging fee with price per kilo basis fee.
Okay. For those that are listening that are curious about your company, can you tell us a little bit about how long the company has been around and what kind of revenue, if you're able to share, as well as the kind of funding that you received and where you guys are as a company?
Yeah, thank you very much. So ispace, our company was founded in 2010, so already 11 years ago. And almost first 5 or 6 years, our focus was only for the manufacturing of lunar rover, which is a small miniaturized 4-wheel kind of lunar car machine. And some people might know Google was doing a Google X Prize challenge back in several years ago. It's finished in 2018, but we were joining that race as one of the final 5 players. So that was our origin. And then in 2017, we did our first Series A finance, which was at that time the largest private funding in Japan. We raised around 100 million USD size of fund in 2017. And that's the timing we started this create manufacturing of a lunar lander business, and also starting to kick off this lunar transportation business. So far, we have completed Series A to Series C private funding, and the total funding size is around 200 million USD size. That is our financing history so far.
All right. For some of those that are listening, in terms of the kind of the size of the funding that you receive, can you help us better understand kind of the justification of why so much capital is needed, and what are you guys actually building in terms of the lander and the components?
Right. So Well, it's a kind of a common information that, well, space business requires a huge capital, as maybe all participants will recognize it. Now, well, let's say 50 for one mission, let's say we can think about 50-50 in terms of two major costs. One is the lander development cost. So, and those, cost needs kind of very, high cost, much components like, thrusters, tanks, or even like structure material. These are made by carbon fiber. So they are all kind of, quite high cost materials. Then on the other hand, we also need to pay for launch service cost, which means what we are manufacturing is only lander, just like Apollo. So we need a rocket service like a Saturn, to get out of this Earth. In our case, we have a contract with the SpaceX, so we are going to pay this launch service fee to SpaceX, and it is also at this moment still a relatively high cost.
Understood. Now, for those that are listening that are not familiar with landers, they may have pictures of the kind of the 60s and 70s of moon landers, but it's not really meant to transfer humans. It's meant to transfer payloads. And also, can you talk about the full mission in terms of not only landing on the moon, dropping off those payloads, or conducting the analytics or sensor research, but also being able to come back into the Earth orbit and then coming down back into our orbit?
Right. Okay. So as for our first mission or first several missions, we do not expect to come back. So our mission is only one-way mission for our first several missions. That's a reason because of it's we really need to prepare for the huge fuels to do that return mission. So first several missions, again, one way. And once we land on the moon, we will deploy our own rover to the lunar surface. And this rover will start searching around the moon surface to gather much data, various data, for the future missions. Now, also, so in terms of a customer, we will transport our customer's payload, and our customer can do many experiment missions on the lunar surface. And some customers will do inside our lander, or rather together with our own rover, they can move around the moon surface and do whatever the mission they like to do, and send back the data through telemetry to the Earth. So this is how our mission will be designed.
So tell us a little bit about kind of the data back. So how is the fidelity of the data and the kinds of data that we can anticipate back from these landers and rovers, and what is the control by which customers can be able to fine tune their experiments since they can actually bring it back?
Right. So, may I understand the question is what kind of data that we can gather?
Right, the data, but also the ability to actually send that information back and the kind of latency and pipeline for that data.
Okay. So in our case, it's pretty simple, to be honest. In our case, the rover or any our customer's payload, which gather data, will send back data through our lander. So first of all, from our rover or any our customer's payload, the telemetry will go to our lander, and then from our lander to the to the Earth, we will simply send back so data on our communication telemetry. Now, on the Earth surface, we have all data will gather through many ground stations, and we have several contacts, which unfortunately we cannot disclose. But through those ground stations, and all data will gather to our mission control center based in Tokyo. So that is how we gather data.
And what's a lag time in terms of the data transmitting from the lander to the ground stations on Earth?
Okay. Well, the time lag itself is pretty simple. It's not a huge long time. It's quite very simultaneous data transportation. Of course, there's a lag, but it's pretty quick. Now, in terms of the mission timeline, since there's only 2 weeks, daytime is only 2 weeks on the lunar surface, our first mission, we only have 2 weeks to complete our mission. So that is a kind of a lifetime that we can gather data.
And is that because of the energy aspects as well as the storage aspects, or what's the limiting factor in terms of having a longer mission?
Right, it's an interesting point. But so again, many people knows about there's a 2 weeks daytime and 2 weeks nighttime. This is kind of a full moon cycle, as you might know. Now, once the moon goes into the nighttime, the unique point is about the temperature. And the temperature goes go lower to minus 150 Celsius or something like that. So that means our battery can go damaged because of this frozen temperature, freezing temperature. Now, so that's the reason. As for our first mission, we have no kind of solution for this battery issue. That's the reason that will limit our lifetime of our mission. However, at this moment, now we have a U.S. subsidiary based in Colorado, and we are already starting our development of our next Series 2 lander, which is much larger size lander, which can bring more than 100 kilograms of payload as a capacity to the lunar surface. And from this Series 2 lander, we have this night survival capability. We have so that we can extend our mission to more longer term.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I think those that are listening are probably not as familiar with this area, are asking the questions of why do this now, and how big is this market in terms of monetization? So in other words, what's the kind of revenue that you can anticipate, and who are some of the customers, and why would they actually want to do this to gather information about the moon?
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. So first of all, there are not much market data existing, unfortunately. However, one of the consultant, data, for example, like a PwC, they have some market expectations like until 2040. So in next 20 years, this market size is going to be over 150 billion US dollar size of market as for lunar transportation. So really quite huge amount of demand is expected to raise. Now, why now is simply because, as you might know, all space agencies like NASA or like even China or like JAXA, ESA in Europe, they're all focusing on moon now. And this is basically driven by NASA's Artemis mission, as you know. So, of course, the schedule has been a little bit changing as far as I understand. However, their plan by NASA is to bring, again, astronaut on the lunar surface, this time not only for visits, but stay on the lunar surface by 2024 or maybe 2025. And also starting a more larger moon base by 2030 or so on. Of course, and also there are new space station around the lunar orbit called Lunar Gateway. This plan has been started. So it's really the government are now focusing towards moon. Now the important important point is government will not going to do everything by themselves, but privatization is a key here. So they are looking for the private company who can take this mission. So creating some lunar base or creating infrastructure on the lunar surface. Those are the role where private companies will take place.
So let me just kind of recap and ask my final question is that I think, for those that are watching or listening and trying to kind of get their arms around this, is that I think the simplest way to think about the moon is it's really the next continent. It is an extension of the Earth. And with another continent, it's a new discovery. And that discovery means that there are resources, and in particularly because it doesn't make sense to bring all these raw resources as well as semiconductor and machinery up into space via rockets, we have to rely on the resources that's already on the moon to develop further for asteroid, for deep space, and for Mars exploration. So it's very logical, but more importantly, it's a physical asset. It's a piece of land as well. So that also means that there is an extension and opportunities for tourism, research,
Exactly,
which
yes.
we haven't gone into, and low gravity research, including medical aspects, but also scientific, physical forms, because the way molecules and atoms get built in low gravity is fundamentally different, which means that there's a lot more things we can do in space that we couldn't do before. So there's just a ton of opportunity, but in a way, it's kind of like a gold rush. It's a bit of land grab. And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about, and this is my last question for you, is the danger of China. And, I think not only in terms of the fact that they have been excluded from the International Space Station cooperation, but because they've been excluded from that, they've created their own full stack capability to launch their own commercial station, but also have huge aspirations on the moon. Because just like if we're doing a travel from New York to Los Angeles, we have to stop along the way to refuel, whether it's EV or gas, and to eat. So same thing with the moon. And they recognize that the moon is going to be an important resource, but also a depot to our next destination. So talk a little bit about the danger of China. What are they doing? And why is it so important for us, the US and the allies, to be able to actually be ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very important and a very kind of difficult question, honestly speaking. However, so yes, now, as you people might know, honestly speaking, China is, along with US, one of the strongest company at this moment who is very actively focusing on lunar moon. And as far as I understand, they are the only country who have landing on the far side, which is a backside of the lunar surface. So they're really aggressive on lunar exploration. Now, so Scott-san, you said it's a danger. Try not to make it danger, but so important thing is we should not make this moon surface as a place where the national conflict will occur. So the key here is registration, and the legal framework is very key. Now, already this activity and has already started. So first of all, as each country has trying to create a law into their national law, and basic concept is same. So U.S., Japan, Luxembourg, UAE, all countries concept is same. No country can own the land asset on the moon surface, and only the private company can get resource but cannot own the asset. So they're just trying to allow the business by private companies, and national countries does not come into owning the territory or like estate. This is a key concept here. Now, this concept is now extended to the more larger number of companies, and there's a working group based in Netherlands, Hague, and China is also joining this working group. So it's really important to set up this kind of regulation. And already, since China is on the moon, US is going to land on the moon. We are going to land on the moon next year. This framework is a matter of time. We are going to create this legal framework as soon as possible.
Wonderful way to respond, and thank you so much for joining late your time.
No worries.
Thank you, Junpei, and I know you're welcome to jump off at this point. And let's transition to Luca and Ian. So thank you very much for patiently listening, and let's get into your respective companies. So Luca, just a quick reset here for those that are maybe just joining now. Tell us a little bit about what your company is doing, and then afterwards, Ian, if you could talk about what Bradford is doing.
Yeah, sure. So what we do, we offer transportation services for satellites. So we have a cargo vehicle. It is basically a bigger satellite with its own propulsion. We fill it up with satellites, and then once we get to orbit, we move around orbit and we reach the final target locations for each single individual satellite and deliver the satellite in a very short amount of time. Just to give you a couple of figures, we can shorten the time up to 85% from launch to operations for the satellite, and we can reduce the cost of deployment of the entire constellation up to 40%. So this is our activities right now. The cargo after deploying the satellites can be used to deliver additional services. One of them is in-orbit demonstration of innovative technology that is not yet on the market to accelerate the go-to-market, but also, as we are testing right now in space, cloud computing direct in space to help more complex and also interesting operations that could be done in space, not just at satellite operation level, but in the future for space logistics sector as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then, Ian, please.
Yes. Yes. Hello. Well, Bradford, I think I introduced at the beginning as providing mobility solutions in space, and I think it's worthwhile to say what that means, because transportation, yes, but it's more than transportation. It's allowing not only your satellite but your payload to go where you wanted to go frequently, possibly multiple destinations with agility on a spur of the moment, and to be able to bring the kind of things you want to have in space that will bring value in space. So if we're talking about large apertures or communications relays, or could even be human space stations, to be able to move around or move other things around, to be able to move an existing spacecraft from one place to another. So we specialize in that. We specialize that on one level, on the propulsion level, enabling satellites, but on the other level, on a vehicle, on a platform level, with our square rocket vehicle, which is one of the first truly mobile spacecraft. Not only truly mobile, but truly multi-purpose mobile spacecraft that can accomplish a whole variety of activities in space.
All right, so just to add a little bit commentary for those that are watching and may not be familiar with this area, is that, well, first of all, again, both of them are not necessarily substituting what the SpaceX and the ULA and others are doing in terms of getting out of Earth's gravity, but rather once it's in space, it's actually handling specific types of payloads. Now, the key difference between D-Orbit and Bradford, I think, is D-Orbit, Luca, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are working on more on the CubeSat, the smaller satellites, and the placement of those satellites, versus Bradford, you guys are working on, because you guys have a larger fundamental propulsion system, you can carry and transport larger things. And if you could quantify what that means. Luca,
it's not only about having a more powerful propulsion system, because you can always you can often make something more powerful, but also something that's very mobile, that's very responsive, but also has a format that makes it a multi-purpose. And that's actually a key thing, because it's we see the market in small satellites and deploying small satellites, but we also see the market of what if you can move around big things. A lot of people want to have bigger things, to be able to see things with higher resolution, more bandwidth, be able to move bigger satellites around. So we're building in the format that allows that kind of capability.
All right, Luca, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's true. So let's say today, most of our customers are small satellites and CubeSat, because that's where the market is today. But the system we have, so basically we have an infrastructure. So, and the service that are built on top of the infrastructure, some of them are provided by us. Some others are ideas from the customer. So I agree with Jan, satellites are becoming bigger and bigger. and you need to think in a modular way, but at the same time stick to where the market is. So currently, small satellites, we are already seeing the transitioning into bigger satellites. Our system is fully modular, so we can transport today 200 kilograms, but we can multiply by 2 or by 4 this capacity with the current cargo, and then we are already designing the next cargo that is capable of more advanced transportation, but especially logistics service. So logistics is, as Ian said, it's not just transportation. I mean, the real added value of logistics is the additional services that you can build on top of a vehicle. So, and this is going to be a very large market. It will be hopefully way more than just the orbit and Bradford, and ispace in the future. And we are very happy to have some way started this concept and to be together with other companies that have very innovative ideas regarding logistics.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to kind of elaborate on the logistics. But before going there, Luca, starting with you first, if you could tell us about the space heritage and the kind of missions that you've accomplished, as well as the near-term next set of missions.
Yeah, sure. So our first launch, so we also are not a very young company for the new space, right? So we started our activities in 2011 when the new space was not even in the dictionary at that time. So our first launch was in 2013, where we tested pretty much all the main technology that we are still using in our cargos and all our products and services. In 2016, we launched our first satellite. And the funny story is that we didn't have enough money to cover the entire mission. So we invented basically the satellite for rent. So we had to rent part of the satellites to other companies that help us to succeed. And now that model we are still using. And the launch was successful a few months later in 2017. And then in 2020, after 1 year and a half of delay, we launched the first cargo with 12 satellites in orbit, plus some additional payloads. In January 2021, so at the beginning of this year, we launched the bigger cargo, also with 20 satellites and additional payloads. In June, we launched another cargo with customers from 14 different countries. And now the next mission is going to be launched in between December and January, so in a couple of months from now. And the following mission that is already fully booked is going to be launched on SpaceX at the end of March, beginning of April in 2022.
Wonderful. And I'm going to come back to you in just a minute. Ian, same question for you guys as well. Space heritage as well as missions accomplished and missions near term.
Well, we're an interesting company. We're rather quiet, but we sometimes call ourselves one of the most capable space companies you've never heard of. Although I think and I hope that's going to change. We have a record of several dozen full propulsion systems in space. We also have a record of smaller components on the attitude and orbit control side that if you totaled it up, we can very credibly, actually we do claim that we've put over 2,000 of our products in space. But on propulsion systems, that numbers more on the several dozen of a variety of cases, and we've enabled imaging missions, we've enabled defense and intelligence missions, we've enabled rendezvous missions with our propulsion systems. Square rocket, which is the next step in mobility, in our mobility solutions. That's something that's in development now. We are putting together initial prototypes and the major elements of that. We're not ready to announce when that will be. Those will be going to space, but we're ready to start making announcements. I'll say soon, however indescript that is.
All right, great. Thank you for that. So going back to you, Luca, can you tell us a little bit about the company in the sense of both from a capitalization, if you're able to share any type of revenue magnitude, and plans for perhaps maybe kind of the next stage of company maturity?
Yeah, sure. So I agree with Junpei when he said that the space is a capital-intensive business, and that's definitely true. Unfortunately, when we started our business, it was so hard to find investors. I had to pitch the company as a pharmaceutical company, because you need a lot of capital at the beginning, patient capital, and then high return at the end. It didn't work, by the way. So we had to change the model. So we divide our roadmap in steps, and we focus a lot on markets. So whatever we were building to sell it straight away, but also to build for the future. So in total, up to last year, so the end of 2020, that is basically the money we used to complete these 3 missions that I mentioned before. So we raised a total amount of 20 million in equity. That is not much for the space sector. But as I said, you can work with customers in order, to compensate what investors are not providing you. That also means that you go slower, right? But at the same time, we are talking about new markets. So you need to go at the same speed of the market as well. So let's say so far this strategy paid back. Of course, in the future, we are accelerating our activities. So just to sustain the pace at which customers are requesting these services, and this will mean some other strategic moves for the future. So that's pretty much say from a private financial aspect. There is another important aspect that I would like to mention since you touched the argument money, the role of government money. So, new space companies typically say, oh, we are commercial companies and we don't care about public money. The reality is that we are really at the beginning of this new sector. And even my customers that are commercial companies, most of them sells to government agencies. So at the end, the role of governments is still very important, and public money can accelerate together with the private money the growth of the sector itself.
Great response. And Ian, can you tell us a little bit about how much you guys have, how you guys have been capitalized, how much you guys have raised, and the kind of the maturity of the company at this point?
So we're sort of odd. So far in our development, we've raised no outside capital. We had some initial capital to get the group started. In the sense of how we started this enterprise back in 2016. Parts of the company go back earlier than that, because they came from acquisitions that we did, acquisitions of technology, acquisitions of operations. But we have been funding a lot of our development. We have a product business, and so we've been funding a lot of our development, our next level of development from internal cash flow. Although that we're finally looking at changing that because as our ambitions have scaled, then going out to the capital markets has become something that we're looking at much more now. But we've been able to grow this business into the size that it is in 4 countries and about 80 employees, and our record in space and on dozens of space missions. We've grown to this, and now we're going to the next step with the Square rocket vehicle and our space mission services.
So great, thank you so much for that, Ian. I think the rest of this time I want to spend a little bit more on logistic services, but also ancillary services as well. Just to give you a little bit more of a context, is I think for those that are watching or listening, they may not be aware, and I think when we talk about cloud computing in space, it kind of raises a quizzical question, really. It's kind of vexing. So, but there's cloud computing, there's edge computing, there's recycling, there's new types of logistical services, there's software and lifecycle management, there's decommissioning and handling of these satellites from the womb to tomb. So there's a lot that needs to be discussed, and we haven't even talked about transport of humans to space stations or to the moon, for instance. Can you each of you talk about where you think the kinds of logistics services that you guys are well suited for, as well as future aspirations?
Well, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example I'm very interested in, and I think this speaks to the way we think about mobility in space. Because if you look at the history of the Earth imaging market, you had a few large satellites that were targeting parts of the Earth every few days, and it was creating a library of imagery. And then we had a whole bunch of companies that got started saying, let's put up lots of satellites, dozens of satellites, hundreds of satellites. Why? Because you want to be able to look at the certain places quicker and more often. And the way to do that is just to have lots of satellites. You have lots of coverage all over the Earth. And there's been lots of sense to that. We say, well, what if you can move around, retask large satellites more often, go different places? Now, you may need more than one, but you could accomplish the same coverage with higher resolution with a few or far fewer spacecraft. And this is where the mobility gives you an advantage, because then you're able to respond to needs on Earth, respond to things that you want to view or image, and you get the advantage, of course, of having larger apertures and larger capabilities, as well as the responsiveness. So we're heading to that kind of logistic services. I mean, the same thing happens a little less so with communications, because communications is more like hanging infrastructure, but actually not, because if you go out into deep space, be able to deploy communications relays into deep space, that's also an advantage, to be able to have that infrastructure on the go. So that's another element of how infrastructure enabled by mobility, and that's how that becomes a value in space.
Mm-hmm. And Luca?
Yeah. So let me answer from like the future perspective, going back to today. That I think it's another way of explaining why those services are necessary and why we are talking about logistics or in-orbit service and recycling and so on. So I see in the near future, and not really far, so all of us will have the possibility to see this happening, an interplanetary space economy, right? So we will be able to connect Mars with the asteroid belt, with the moon and the Earth, and have travels of goods and likely also people. In order to establish a colony, you really need this infrastructure. Otherwise, it will be too expensive to go without such infrastructure just to Mars, or just to visit it. So if we start from this, let's call it vision, even if it's not really in 100 years, then what do we need to enable this vision? So definitely we need a global infrastructure that we call it logistics. So we need to be able to transfer goods and people, and to transfer raw material from the asteroid belt back and forth on Mars, Moon, and the Earth. But in order to enable such infrastructure, you will need very special vehicles that are definitely not too expensive and very capable. And you will need to build those vehicles directly in space in order to be able to provide this service. But if you need to build the vehicle in space, then you need to have orbital manufacturing. And orbital manufacturing require raw materials. But it doesn't make sense to bring the raw materials from Earth. It will be too expensive. We are not really solving the issue. So you will need to find raw material like locally in space. And the raw materials actually are already there. So in the future, of course, we will have also asteroid mining. But at the moment, there are a lot of junks right there, out there, that we can use. We can, like reprocess, disassemble, recycle. We can use 3D printing technology or maybe another type of technology in the future to provide new materials. But in order to recycle satellites, you need to be able to get to those satellites, grab the satellites, and move them into the recycling facility. And that's in-orbit servicing. Of course, to be sustainable, the in-orbit servicing need to provide additional services and not just active debris removal. That's why you need to serve the satellite operators. That is the market that is today existing, and the difference between operating hundreds of vehicles for in-orbit servicing with respect to hundreds of satellites of a constellation that is serving Earth is that the satellite constellations, it's composed pretty much by the same satellite, pretty much in the same orbits, doing pretty much the same things. But when you are operating hundreds of vehicles in space, each of them are doing something different, very complex maneuvers. So if you just focus on the technology on the vehicle, then you will need to have a very expensive vehicle capable of performing these complex maneuvers. What if we transform all those vehicles into terminals and use an infrastructure of cloud computing in space to provide, like this service? And that's, and now we come to today, right? So I took it from the vision to today, but I think it's a logical consequence of step-by-step approach.
It's fascinating. I mean, I think we don't normally think of the space in this context. I mean, on the ground, it makes sense, right? I mean, we have train station like the Penn Station. You have Greyhound bus terminals, for instance, and they're all regional and they're all in specific areas. And similarly, everything from the communication and satellite relays to these terminals, these depots in space, to recycling area, for instance, there's just a lot. And I think one of the things, kind of a big picture, just to keep it simple for those who are watching, is that right now we're in the stage of launching things into space, satellites and other payloads into space and the moon. But at some point, you're going to have potentially hundreds of thousands of objects, satellites, apertures, relays, whatever it is, floating in space, on the moon, and anywhere in between. And those are all going to have to be maintained, decommissioned, operated, and make sure they're optimized. That's a huge opportunity. And I wonder, both of you have started to touch upon a little bit, but aside from the logistic and the mobility aspect, talk about the maintenance side and how you guys are assisting with the maintenance.
Yeah, I can start with that. And I think we need also to change the way we design space systems in order to be maintained. So today, you're not thinking about disassembling a satellite in space because it's not possible, right? So you just design to optimize the cost. What if we introduce the design to maintenance? This is a pretty used techniques in many other sectors like trains, even automotive. Why not in space? So if you apply these techniques to satellites, maybe today it's useless, but your satellite is already ready for tomorrow, and the cost of applying this methodology with respect to the others, it's basically the same. So you don't have such an increase of cost that put at stake this one. So this is going to help future activities for those who's going to provide recycling or reuse of assets in space.
And then for Ian, and this would be our last comment here.
Well, I think it's clear if you have effective moving trucks and effective tow trucks, and they're low cost and they're mobile and they can get around and they can effectively carry and hold the things that you want to hold and carry and move around, then we can both have a space that's cleanable and can be cleaned and maintained. And so that's that's where we want to take this. We don't want it's odd to call it static because things are moving around all the time in space. But this mode that we've had for decades of you send a spacecraft to an orbit and it's there and it stays there and does nothing else but just orient itself properly. I think that's going to change, and we want to build the spacecraft that gets us out of that mode. We want to have the effective, not just moving vans, but effective tow trucks, effective operational vehicles. You can imagine on the ground a van with a satellite dish on it that's used in certain things. But just thinking of a functional vehicle in space that does things with mobility, with agility, that's where we want to go, and that's where we think there's going to be modes of operation that we haven't even we're not even doing today. We can't even think about today, in business models that we don't even exist today. Are there going to be? Are we going to have standby services? Are we going to have rapid reaction services? Are we going to have cleaning services? This is what we're looking at, because space is going to be a place of activity, and you better have the agility to operate in that environment, because it's big, and there's a lot of challenges with it.
Yep. All right. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Christine, please.
Yes, thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible, educational, and again, inspirational. I want to thank you all for being on our panel, and again, give you a virtual round of applause. Thank you, everybody.